Cillian, thank you so much for your time. Just a little personal aside. I think I was 10 years ago when I was 17, I saw Turk. So I've been such a fan of you and Enda for years. I
Ah,
absolutely adored this book and film. You did an exceptional job.
thank you. Appreciate that.
I'd love to start. I was talking to your director, Tim, last week for an interview, and I thought what was really interesting was that he said that your wife, shout out fellow Kilkenny woman, said that it was her that actually had read the book and kind of put you onto this. Can you talk to me about the kind of inception of this project? What made you want to like work on this project?
Yeah, we were in myself and Tim were looking for a project to make together again after making Peaky Blinders
Yeah.
together, and so he came over to Dublin a few years ago, and we were like kind of throwing around ideas. And Yvonne, my wife, was there, and we were talking about Claire's work, and she said, "Well, what about small things?" And I said, I mean, surely the rights will be gone at this stage, but we checked and miraculously they were available.
Mm.
And and then Tim read it, and then I sent it to Enda, and Enda had read it already and loved the idea. And so it kind of happened really quickly. Then Alan Maloney came out, who's my co-producer, and he loved it. So it kind of happened very, very quickly. And then Matt and Ben came on board. So yeah, Yvonne does have to take a lot of credit. Yeah. For most things in my life.
Love that. And I want to talk about Bill, your character. I wonder, obviously, you had this gorgeous book to work with. You have a masterful script from Enda. But for you as an actor, what were the little things that helped you step into Bill? Like, did you pull from real life growing up in Cork and, 80s, 90s? Like, how did you get into Bill Furlong? How did you build him for you?
Being an actor is kind of like being a detective. You're always looking around for stuff that will help, anything that will help. I mean, having the book as the primary resource was the most important thing, I think.
Yeah.
So you just constantly using that, and then obviously the script, and then talking with Enda and talking with Tim, listening to endless podcasts by Claire Keegan about the book. I've never actually met her, but we listened a lot to what she had to say about him. That was very useful. And then I think, that it's a recognizable type of Irish man to me. I remember those silent, deep thinking, kind of reserved countrymen. I remember encountering them as a kid. And that physicality is kind of familiar to me. I know that type of man. Um, so it's always you're like a magpie drawing from everywhere you can but it's nothing massively autobiographical or anything like that.
But I think that's it. I think a lot of Irish people are going to be taken aback by how real these characters feel, especially with Eileen Walsh, who gives a perfect performance as kind of the woman she's not heartless, but she's like, what does she say? In order to get by in life, you just have to ignore some things. So I
Yeah,
imagine everyone is doing their work that it probably just felt like so easy to fall into that flow of feeling like you are a man in 80s Ireland.
yeah. And I think Eileen said she recognized her mum in there. And I think the character is sort of like a lot of Irish society there, like you had to just get on with it because the church controlled everything. They controlled the health system, they controlled the education system, and it was all sanctioned by the government. And she, like, when you think of what she has to lose, she's got five daughters. The church controls the convent where they go to school. So like, they've got the whole thing in the palm of their hands. So she's a good woman and she's a good mother, and she's a cares about people, but she is practical.
Exactly. And I think some people might walk into this film if they haven't read the book and wonder, this is kind of talking about a part of Irish history that predominantly affected women, but here we are being told through a male perspective. And even though it's Claire Keegan, even though it works so well, because Bill is so much more than just a man, he's this like blue collar family man with five daughters to think of. And I wonder, what is it about Bill's perspective do you think was the right way to tell this story?
Yeah, well, I think it's a story written by a woman with the male protagonist in a world full of women, and I think he's formed by what happened to his mother, because he was born out of wedlock, to use that awful expression, and yet his mother and his mother's life and his life were saved by the charity of this rich woman, Mrs. Wilson. And so he was defined by this act of kindness, by this act of charity. And I think
Yeah,
that has made him the person that he is and made him that kind, empathetic kind of man. And that just shows, I think, again, it's so deep, all of this stuff. It's so complex, but I think it shows that what happens in childhood happens forever, and the values that you're given as a child can form you as an adult. So there's so many things at play throughout the seemingly complex, seemingly simple novel, which is actually very complex.
exactly. And I think you're obviously no stranger to Irish roles. You know, The Wind That Shakes the Barley, you're playing this like Irish kind of war hero. And then you're playing someone on the fringes of society in Breakfast on Pluto. And I wonder, making a film like this and talking about the most shameful things that Irish society has ever been subjected to, I wonder, how did that change the way you felt about being Irish? Did it change the way you feel about your cultural identity? Like, what did you take home with this?
Uh it was very educational, in a profoundly depressing way,
Yeah,
reading about it. And I think for my, like, I'm 48, so like I very much had a foot in both Ireland's, that deeply, deeply religious, conservative Ireland. And then I also have a foot in, this very, very liberal, progressive Ireland that we live in now. So I kind of straddle both worlds. And um, so that was interesting to me. But then I was raised Catholic. It was taught by Catholic schools, taught by Presentation Brothers, like all the way up. And I remember asking my son once when he was younger, I remember saying to him, "So, Maliki, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be an astronaut or a train driver or a priest?" And he said, "What's a priest, Daddy?" And like it was like, a mad but natural response from a 10-year-old at that time. But for me, priests were just everywhere and so much part
yeah,
of it. I think, what we have to just accept is that the legacy of the Catholic Church in Ireland is one of huge achievement in education, for example, but also this legacy of abuse and cruelty. And we just have to accept both versions of it. And it's, for me, it's not about being anti-faith, because I'm not, and I very much respect people who have faith. I just don't want faith imposed upon people, and I
yeah,
don't believe in absolutism of any kind or control of people's bodies or morals. I just don't believe in any of that. But it's not
yeah,
anti-faith. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. It's a tough one, but I think it's one that I think perfect, because like Bill Furlong has faith. It's just not the faith that everyone else has. He has faith in humanity, he has faith in doing what's right for humans, I guess. Like faith is still a huge part of this book and film, just not Catholicism.
I think so, but I also don't see him ever. I've never seen him as a hero. I think he's having a nervous breakdown, and he's being
Yeah,
sort of pushed towards this act, but his body is pushing him towards this. It's a non-intellectual thing. I think in some weird way, I think he thinks he's saving his mother, and I think that the consequences of what will happen after the screen go black are very, very serious. But
yeah,
he's not thinking about that, and I think he's just clearly doing this thing because of all these events that are happening to him simultaneously. But it's not like he's an activist. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. But he is in his kind of sort of his own way, in a
In
way
his
that,
own small way, but I think he's probably, 20 years too soon or 15 years too
yeah,
soon.
yeah,
But I also think he's just doing it because something in his being tells him that this is profoundly incorrect and wrong.
yeah, exactly. And this is one of your first time as a producer, and I wonder, that obviously comes with plethora of new duties, but I wonder, did being a producer as well affect your approach to the character as an actor? Like, did you feel you had more freedom with what you could do with the character?
No, 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 no. It didn't change the creative way thing. And anyway, in fact, it just kind of enriched it, I think. What it allowed me to do was to hand pick the people that I really wanted to work with again, which were Enda, Tim, Alan Maloney, Eileen Walsh, many of the crew,
Yeah,
um, Maureen Hughes, the casting director, like many of these people that I've worked with over the course of my career who I know are astonishingly good at what they do and were really, really kind to me and supportive to me over the years, was to be able to go, wouldn't it be brilliant to bring all these people back together again and work with them all? and it worked
Yeah.
out. So that was really exciting. And like the practical stuff of like budgets and tax credits and all that stuff, Alan Maloney is genius at all that stuff, but he's also really good creatively. So for me, it's the thing of like bringing people together is the most exciting thing, connecting people. And then also like being in the edit and, watching the film take shape and being able to, I was heavily involved in the music and things like that. That stuff is very exciting to me.
And you're working as a producer on the very highly anticipated The Immortal Man, the Peaky Blinders film. I
Oh yeah.
wonder, what can you tell us about it? What can people expect? Maybe something that they didn't see in the show?
You know that I can't tell you anything. I wish I
Okay,
could.
I'll try something else because I am the horror editor here at Collider. So I'd love to know, is there anything you can tell us about 28 years later that we haven't seen the original trilogy? And a question I've always wanted to ask you, because you worked with one of the greatest horror filmmakers of all time, Wes Craven. I'd
Oh
love
yeah.
to know, is there anything that he taught you that you might now bring to kind of horror projects in the future?
Interesting. I can't tell you anything about 28 years later either, other than we've shot it.
Okay.
The second one, this we sh so uh, I Wes Craven did that really wasn't he wasn't making a horror movie.
Yeah.
Uh, then it was a sort of a thriller, which was interesting. And
Yeah.
I don't watch horror movies because I'm a scaredy cat. And I genuinely like the only horror movie I think I've ever watched is The Shining because it's Kubrick. But otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm too much of a scaredy cat. So I didn't really learn much from him. I guess he was very good at jump scares and all of that stuff. But it felt like we were in a different genre. It's making that movie.
I think those horror sensibilities do creep in though. Like you go into that film and you know right away it's a Wes Craven, even though it's not Scream, it's not Nightmare on Elm Street. You could
Right.
still tell.
Really? Okay. You know better than I would.
Well, yeah, you need to watch them. That could be your Halloween
Too scared.
watching.
Too
And
scared.
I think it's fair to say that all small things like these, it doesn't paint Irish society in the best light. It paints in a very honest light. But
Mm.
I wonder, as you're preparing for this to be released, how do you feel about the Irish public seeing this? Are you nervous? What's your feeling about that?
I'm not nervous. I'm excited. I mean, a film isn't finished until the audience sees it, and it's an
Yeah,
Irish story, so I'm very, very invested in what the Irish people think about it. But the book is so beloved here, and it's on the curriculum, in schools.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
my young fella is learning it in secondary school, yeah, in sixth year.
yeah,
Um, so I think a lot of people know what they're gonna get going into it. But
yeah.
I just think art is a good way of looking at these difficult times in history in history of any country.
Mm,
And like we've played this film in Berlin, obviously, and it did really well, and we
yeah,
played it in America, and there is a universality to it that people are really responding to, um, which is brilliant.
yeah. And I think last question, but when I talked to Tim, I asked him, what's one message you'd like people to take away from the story? And I think he summed it up perfectly. He said to be silent is to be complicit. And I think, would you agree with that? Or what when you read the book, let's say, what was the main thing you took away from it?
Yeah, I think he's right. I mean, that's true, but like I'm very reluctant to ever tell people what to think. I feel like if it gets what happens with this film is that it goes to black and then the credits roll and people stay in their seats and
Yeah,
they stay and they start chatting because the film only really starts where the screen goes black. So people will have many different points of view. So I just want people to be provoked. It's a provocation, to say like, what do you think about this? And it can be just pure entertainment or it can be something more. But
mm,
that's all I like films that have a point of view and kind of just poke at you gently to say, what do you think? Like, what do you think about this?
that's it about both the book and the film. It doesn't spoon feed you how to feel at all. And I think
No.
same with Oppenheimer, he's by no means this kind of straight hero, and there's a villainous side, but like Nolan leaves that kind of for you to decide for yourself. And I think it's very similar here.
That's the point of art, I think, is not to answer the questions, but to ask them.
Exactly, exactly. Well, You did an amazing job, Cillian. It's a brilliant film, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Nice to chat.